You're listening to episode 90 of Lifestyle Locker Radio with Tom Foxley.
Yourself and everyone else listening knows that we can't out-motivate a bad mindset. We just can't.
Hi, I'm Dr. Josh Hand, and welcome to the Lifestyle Locker Radio, where we dive into what makes an awesome lifestyle. From relationships to money mindset, nutrition to fitness, emotional health to peak performance, we bring you on an amazing journey to unleashing your human potential. So here's a little bit about our guest, Tom Foxley. He works with functional athletes on their mindset, essentially giving athletes the thoughts that serve them instead of falling back on the same thought patterns which kept them stuck. His athletes are of all different levels, from those in their first few weeks of training to competitors at the CrossFit Games. He has spent the last year touring his homeland of the UK and also the rest of Europe, presenting his Mindset Rx'd Seminar to over 500 athletes, as well as speaking at the headquarters of banks, businesses, and communities. His podcast has hosted the biggest names in functional fitness like Kelly Starrett, Paoli and Julien Pineau, to more left field examples of success, including marketing genius Seth Godin, bestselling author Scott Carney, and scientist Dr. Andy Galpin. Tom's mission is to show athletes their true potential, then give them the tools to achieve it. Hey everyone, today we've got Tom in. He's from the UK, so you're going to fall in love with this guy in about 3 seconds once he just opens his mouth the first time. But hold on 1 second, Tom, don't say anything. He's a Mindset Rx guy, so you're going to love what he has to say. His story is pretty badass. So welcome, Tom.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you because over the course of interviewing people and growing up myself and doing things like fire walks and sweat lodges and understanding the mind is the key to almost everything in life, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, it's the fundamental. It seems kind of so obvious that we dismiss it. It's I'm sure we'll get into this, but our instant reaction is to look for something very tangible we can change, instead of addressing the reasons why we're doing the things that we want to do, you don't want to do, or why we're not doing the things we do want to do. So the mind is our beliefs, our psychology is the foundation for everything we achieve or don't achieve.
Exactly. So let's hear your story. You have a pretty unique story. Just reading a small piece of it from your website, but give us your story. Like where did Mindset Rx come from? I know people listening RX think like I'm weightlifting, but this is this is a different RX here.
Yeah, it came originally from, I think we have to backtrack a fair amount to when I was about 13 or 14, when I was cycling home from school one day, and just kind of to fill you in, I didn't cycle anywhere. I was the active kid, but for some reason I was cycling home that one day, and it's the typical English countryside of green rolling hills, and obviously because it's going to a sad place, this is a grey and rainy day. Yeah. So I was cycling home. I got almost a mile away from my house, and my heart started doing some really weird stuff. Initially, it just stopped beating, and I thought, this isn't good. So I lay down on the road, and then my heart began beating like 260, 270 beats per minute.
Wow.
And I was kind of thinking, this really isn't good. There's something wrong with me. Like I was just starting kind of like going down the route of anatomy and physiology, and I was like this feels weird. This feels really weird. And I was super active until this point. I'd hung my whole personality on my athletic ability, and kind of that side of things. So my heart started going crazy, and then consciousness literally started closing in from the outside, just like in a film. Like darkness came from the outside. I kind of it became a bit kind of echoey in my life, I think is the best way to put it. And then my heart stopped beating. And that was the point where I thought, no, this isn't good. This definitely isn't good. And I felt this pressure building up in my chest, just growing, this growing pressure in my chest. You feel the chambers of my heart swelling. And then it just kind of bang and kicked back in. And I did the proper cinematic and I was back.
Yeah. Wow.
And then that was the first time out of thousands it must have happened to me by now, to kind of fast track through going to the doctors, going to the best heart specialists in the UK, all that kind of stuff. They temporarily diagnosed me with the least positive diagnosis ever, which was sudden death syndrome. They were worried that if I was going to physically exert myself, I would just die. So knowing that, well, initially they told my mom told me, and then I had this looming over me for a long time. And then they changed the diagnosis to, you know what, we think it's just hormonal. We think it could be anxiety based. I kind of dismissed the anxiety based, but like we think it could be a hormonal change because I was growing up. And they said, just go back to training, because I wasn't allowed to train for like 6 months at this point. So go back to training. At this point, I was soccer star, like the star. That's arrogant. I was having like quite high level trials. I played cricket, the most English sport of all, at quite a high level. I was like an athletic kid. So suddenly I had to go back to pushing myself hard and to becoming an athlete again. And I realized that I'd completely lost all my confidence in my ability, in who I was. And because of that, not only my physical performance deteriorated, but I lost all my confidence as who I was. I became a completely different kid, like shy and timid and kind of just a depressed kid as well. I was definitely depressed and anxiety ridden. And I also, all my like grades started just tumbling. So I went from very high achiever to plummeting. What I didn't realize is just the way I was thinking about myself, is the way I was categorizing my life, is the way I was categorizing who I was. To kind of fast track the story again, I was introduced to 2 things. First of all, a book called Bounce by Matthew Syed, which introduced 10,000 hour rule. You do things 10,000 hours, you get very good. And then also a guy called Bear, who was a Royal Marines commando. And then those 2 things in unison started to slowly unpick the story of I'm not good enough, I'll never be able to achieve anything, like all these kind of stories, I'm weak, I'm like all these kind of things that lots of us have going around our heads. And then slowly became a Royal Marines commando, which is like the elite of the British military. It's the longest basic training in all of the British Armed Forces, all the Western Armed Forces. And I was a reservist, so I did that as a part-time job. And then as my other job, I became a personal trainer, eventually going to CrossFit, starting working with CrossFit athletes. And I realized that the change that I went through myself, I needed to impart on other people. The conversations I was having with the athletes I was working with, they needed to be passed on to these other athletes. And then slowly Mindset Rx'd came, where I created a system. I learned from some amazing mentors. I read some incredible books, and then I began to pass it on. It became like a process of taking people from a very stuck, kind of scared place maybe, or a stuck place where they're just kind of not really sure about where they are and where they're going, and they don't feel like change is possible, to somewhere where they make consistent change on a regular basis.
Very cool. So you went from like this athlete, it was like a roller coaster of life. I mean, it's pretty crazy. 13 years old and recognizing that something that bad was happening and being aware of it.
Yeah, it was scary. Like it was I didn't really appreciate how scary it was at the time, because that was just my life. I was like, I only had one experience of life, and like most of us, especially at that age, it's a fairly myopic view of life. So I didn't really have any other perspectives of that, and I was scared.
Yeah. Then so let's fast forward to now. Now you're working with, are you working primarily with CrossFit athletes? You're working with different people? What kind of work are you actually doing now with Mindset Rx? What's your client like?
Yeah, so most of the people that I work with come from the CrossFit world, or the functional fitness world, or competitive fitness world. And most, like kind of 80% of people who work with me come from that kind of background. And then I kind of get the fringe kind of people coming in from the side who like are also interested in mastering themselves athletically, whether that is just becoming a better version of themselves, or winning triathlons, or whatever it is. And then I get like a very small sector of people as well who want to just master their mindset for general life. So people who want to become better business people, or basically is people who want to get out of their own way in order to become the most successful they possibly can, but mostly CrossFitters. Okay,
so you said something good, like getting out of your own way. So, you know, for the audience listening, we got a pretty active audience. What is the biggest obstacle that you see from someone that has like an athletic life, or very active life, that's holding them back mindset wise? Is there a specific like thing, or you kind of have to kind of step back and look at them from like a 50,000 foot view?
Yeah, there's of course common stories, and common stories can be like, I don't have enough time, to I'm too busy, to my setup doesn't allow me to do this, or I've just never been successful, so I never will be. Like these kind of stories that come up. But really, it's a one size fits one solution. Like I can kind of speculate and I can guess as to where most people will be, but that's a really kind of there's this beautiful phrase: when we conclude, we stop seeking. And I was introduced to that phrase by my fantastic mentors, Brian Grasso and Carrie Campbell, specifically Carrie, and it encapsulates mindset in such a brilliant way. Like, if we go into mindset with this like one story of like, oh, I know what's wrong with me. It was all this one event in my past. Like this is my history and I know it, and like there's nothing to change from here. It's exactly the same from like we will never make any change in that situation. And it's exactly the same from my point of view. If I say the problem is this with 80% of the people, even though it might be true in 80% of the people, it stops the curiosity, and it's the curiosity that creates change. We get stuck because we accept the world as it is. We create change by becoming curious about what the world is, becoming curious about why we believe the things we do and why we do the things we do. So kind of to give a bucket answer, whilst it may be accurate, isn't entirely helpful for everyone.
True. Okay, good. So where does mindset actually come from? Like, where do we start to gain or get our mindset from? You know, like if I'm almost 40, I obviously have a mindset that's been around for a while, possibly, right? I may have a brand new one as of yesterday, but I may have this mindset that's been around even for decades. So when does mindset start evolving and being created, you know, in the human?
Yeah, wonderful question. I love this because it kind of touched on both the theoretical side and the very tangible side as well. We can look at whilst there's stuff that may happen in utero, we're almost born as a blank canvas, as close to a blank canvas as we'll ever be. And then slowly throughout our lives, we start encountering various different influences. I use the 4 E's as my kind of as my description of influence. So education, what we're explicitly told. Obviously, this doesn't start for a while. It starts to when we can comprehend language and formulate our own senses. So what we're explicitly told. There is I've done education. Environment. Like what we pick up, what we're implicitly told. So what's implied by our parents' behavior is probably the biggest one. What is kind of implied by the kind of the general zeitgeist, like the kind of the feeling in the world at the time. And then we have what haven't I done? Evolution is a big one. So like we can't, as Joe Rogan always says, like he describes us as a, like we're walking around like with a mind in our meat vehicle, and like we can't override millions of years of evolution, because evolution has hardwired us to think of negative situations. It's hardwired us to take negative situations with more weight than positive situations. Like there's the standard 5-to-1 ratio, and then we have experience as well. What we experience forms are like is another influence. All this accumulates in narratives we tell ourselves, which are stories, beliefs, and essentially our worldview. And this worldview, these beliefs, could be anything from a very cultural thing, like the UK is the greatest country in the world, or America is the greatest country in the world, whatever that cultural thing is, to a very kind of a personal thing, like I'll never be successful because of X, Y, or Z. And the thing is, we can never act outside of these beliefs. So our common kind of default setting is we think, okay, but I can never get away from influence. So how do I change my outcome? Because if we can't act outside our beliefs, and our beliefs formed by influence, and also our actions re-emphasize our beliefs, how do we capture this? So what we have to do is start becoming much more aware of the language we use, the beliefs we hold, and then from there we can get perspective. To kind of take the next step, where the kind of the view that's popular in the West goes wrong, is we try and force a new behavior. We try and like change the outcome, change the behavior in order to change what we achieve, how we feel. Whereas we need to go back. We need to really identify these beliefs, and we need to come from a less kind of forcing way in order to achieve, because yourself and everyone else listening knows that we can't out motivate a bad mindset. We just can't. Like, we can listen to all the self-help books in the world or read the self-help books in the world. We can attend as many kind of 3-day seminars as we want and feel pumped up. We can watch YouTube videos and listen to our favorite playlists and practice gratitude and all these kind of stuff and meditate daily. And whilst it might feel great in the moment, we eventually go back to these loops and these consistent behaviors that have proved themselves time and time and time again because they're congruent with our beliefs. So what we have to do is take a more educated, a slower approach, a more gentle approach, identify not why we're doing things, because we don't need to go into regressive therapy or anything like that, but we do need to understand who we are. And once we understand who we are and who we want to be and who we dream of being, then we can start to take steps towards that.
Okay, great. So how would someone know? Like, how would, or before that question, at what age would you say someone would maybe start to recognize they have a mindset, like they have this, this thing, and how would you know if you need to change it or modify it or whatever? So
it's basically people become aware of their mindset at various different ages. I think and it's mostly a cultural thing. If you look at like Eastern culture, some aspects of Eastern culture, and the way that Buddhism is kind of a very big part of life in some countries, awareness, I think, is higher. You look at very kind of spiritual areas and awareness is generally higher. And we kind of, it can depend. Like, I became aware when I was about 18, like when I got introduced to those bounce and the guy called Bear, who was the Royal Marine. Like, those two things together, they create an awareness. And there's I can't remember which kind of Buddhist great said it, but you have two lives. And your second one begins when you realize you have only one. Like, that's the key here.
Okay,
so
the awareness.
The awareness is key. And your second, sorry, I've forgotten your second question as well.
Me too. So when does it start, and then how do you know you actually need to change it?
Oh, you know when you need to change it because you can't achieve what you want to achieve. And you spin your wheels and you try different things and you throw like all kinds of different manner of stuff at the wall and none of it sticks. And no matter how hard you try, you just can't be successful.
Okay. I was taught something young growing up, and I still have to apply it today. Like you mentioned, like people are searching for, like, we search for the outside. Like, we want to achieve this, or we want to get that, or we want to do that. There's always like something outside of us. And my father, and I'm sure he was taught this from another great person as well, is you got to be, do, have.
Nice.
You got to be the person, right, before you actually do the action to actually have what you want to have. It doesn't go in that reverse order.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you said, and it's a really interesting concept.
It's the funny thing is, it's this kind of age-old wisdom that is so easy to look over because it's so cliched and it's so overused, and we look for this kind of soundbite, and we look for something that we can repost on Instagram, or we look for something that we can quote to our friends to look clever, or to make ourselves momentarily feel better as well. But the answer sometimes isn't found in the nugget, in the kind of the small digestible or easily digestible fragment. It's found in a deeper knowledge of the subject matter and ourselves. Okay.
So let's say we recognize, man, I have a crappy mindset. I recognize that and I want to change it. Is there a simple step? And I know nothing is simple, but is there like one thing that someone can do, one mental action step they can say, this is my first step in recognizing and then shifting? Like, what would that look like or sound like?
Nice. So like I have 4 different mindset models, and we probably don't have time to get into like exactly what each one means and the paths from there, but it essentially comes down to 2 parts, or two options. If you feel like you're completely stuck in the hole, like I'm a loser and I can't make progress and like everyone else can have it and not to me, and you look at the past for proof of the fact that you're not successful, you haven't been successful, and you never will be successful. If you feel just what I call my checked mindset model, like checked as in checkmate. Mm-hmm. If you feel like that and you're just stuck, then we start with an exercise that I call an AMWAP. And AMWAP is a pun on the AMRAP of CrossFit, as many reps as possible, which comes with as many wins as possible. What we do, and this might happen 3 times throughout the day, it might happen at the end of the day. I like to do it right at the end of the day, because it gives us our subconscious time to dwell on it. What we do is we bring up all the things that we've done that made us feel good, not things that we're grateful for, because as we know from doing gratitude practice in the past, they don't always feel great and you lose the gratitude very quickly. There's only so many times you can be grateful for the roof over your head and having access to electricity and all that kind of stuff before it loses its novelty. Whilst that stuff's important, what we need to do is, if we're in this kind of checked mindset model, to show ourselves, to start rewriting the story of I'm not good enough by seeing, okay, these are the things I've done. Like, this is what I did that might be success, that is going to make me more successful in the future, or is going to change who I am. So it could be stuff from, like, I counted my wins today. I did my AMWAP. That is a win. For example, I ate clean. And we're looking for the small things here. So I went to bed on time. I had an enjoyable conversation with my spouse. I turned up to work. I did the work. I trained hard. I turned up to the gym. Even though it didn't go well, I turned up to the gym. And at the end, I'm still here doing my AMWAP. So that's path one. If we're in a very negative, depressive, not necessarily with depression, but depressive mindset, we begin to look at, okay, what am I doing to prove that this story of I'm not good enough is untrue? The other half of that, if we're either in the change of mindset model, so fluctuating from success to failure, from like being motivated to not motivated, and we can't stay consistent, we're on this roller coaster, then what we do, and also if we're in like what I call a chaser mindset model, like I've just got to get there now, I've just got to go fast, like give me more, and we end up missing the hard work. But I'm sure like people listening can identify friends or maybe themselves in one of those three categories. What we do there is we need to start hearing your subconscious narrative more. We need to bring your subconscious narrative up to the surface, and this could be in a few ways. So we could very simply look at behaviors. We could look at things you do that lead you towards where you don't want to be. Or we can look at the physical symptoms. So what does your body feel like? Some people associate very heavily with my body feels heavy. I feel lethargic. I always used to feel tired, for example. Like that was my story. I'm tired. And I only realized that when I started feeling like, oh, my eyes always feel tired. I always feel sore no matter what I do. It could be our emotional states. And to generalize massively, and I think it's a cultural influence as much as a biological influence, females generally get in touch with their emotional states much more easily. And for whatever reason, but if it can be the other way around as well. But like we can identify emotional states. So do I feel overly emotional? Do I swing with my emotions? Do I feel just sad? Do I feel excitable? And then finally, and probably most usefully, we have our thoughts. We need to identify our thoughts. What's the narrative running in our head? Is it the phrase I'm always tired, or is it the phrase I'm too busy for this, or is it the phrase I'm not good enough for this, or like what is it, like I'm not clever enough, I'm too stupid, I'm too bright for this, I'm too good for this, or I'm inferior or superior to these people? Like what is this phrase going round and round and round our head? And when we do that, we can do this through a few different exercises. And if you're a CrossFit athlete working with me, for example, we'll talk about we'll talk about learning that language within the gym, like listening to your inner athlete, I call it. So we talk about that. And then if you're just like a general folk, we begin talking about it in the rest of your life. So we begin in a very kind of almost, I hate to say sanitized environment, but like a distraction-free environment where we just piece of paper, you try and stream your consciousness onto paper. You don't judge it, you don't analyze it, you don't try to direct it in any direction, you don't try and force it at all. And then you do it for like 7 to 10 days. And then if you're working with me, I look back over it and kind of go through and say, okay, these are the areas you need to look at. If it's just you and you're doing this by yourself, and this is where I recommend most people start, by the way, we look back after 7 to 10 days and we look for themes. We look for things that are missing. We look for things that are very obvious. We look for things that are significant, and we look for stories that we're telling ourselves on a regular basis. And this is no eliminate your limiting belief like this. Like it doesn't happen like this. There's no click of the fingers change. It's someone I was doing a podcast on, when was it, Monday, with someone, and they had this moment of realization, like kind of you alluded to before. Like this guy was 35. And he's got 35 years worth of neural pathways ingrained. We're not going to reprogram that at the drop of a hat. It's going to take time. It's like myelin sheaths, to get very nerdy, have to be like unwrapped and rewrapped. They have to be put in different locations. We need to strengthen neural pathways, and it's not going to happen instantly. So it needs to take time. The best analogy of this is, imagine you're in a meadow and you go from point A to point B. And every day you walk from point A to point B. This is analogous to your behavior that's not serving you anymore, or the emotion or the thought that's not serving you anymore. You go to that place over and over again. You form a very distinct, very clear, very easy to travel path between point A and point B. But now you realize point B, like let's use the example of a well. The well's dried up. That it's no longer giving you what you need. You need to go to point C. And in this time, the meadow's grown up. It's thick, it's difficult to push through, and that path to point A is very tempting because there could be water there. It could help you. Like, it's the illusion. There's nothing there, but it could help you. You tell yourself it could be there. You're looking for a miracle. Instead, you're like, I have to go to point C, and you push through this grass. You go there and you really force your way through. You get to a different well. You get your water, come back, push your way back through, and you come back the next day, and the grass is almost exactly the same as it has been. And the path to point A to point B is still clear, and you have to travel this path over and over and over and over and over again, and eventually, very, very slowly, the path becomes more distinct and easier to travel, and we do it more often.
Yeah, that's really neat. I like that analogy a lot. We can get into neurology in a minute, because there's some really neat stuff that we can chat about. But this concept of the AMWAP, I think, is really cool. So with the AMWAP, is that you looking for your wins during that day, or are you kind of looking at the wins over the course of a week, a month, where are you looking for your wins when you're doing this?
So the more frequently we can do this, the better.
Well, not when you do it, but like where are what wins are you looking for?
Yeah, so it could be that we're looking for, if for example, we do it on a very, very regular basis, we look for wins in the past 3 hours, 6 hours, 24 hours. But it's also very, very important. And kind of once a week with my athletes, especially, we look back over a much longer time period. So in the year so far, what have you done that's significantly taken you close to your goal? Because sometimes the small wins become stale and repetitive. Or in the past 5 years, how have you changed? How have you become a better human being? How have you taken steps towards who you want to be? And those like, not the combination of the big wins and the small wins. Like, the small wins are very important. They're the foundation. Like, success is never a surprise. It comes from those small wins repeated. Yeah. But the combination of those small wins and the big wins, it works in harmony to produce like eventual change. And I can't say that word enough. Eventual change. It takes time. Like, people get frustrated with this. They're like, Tom, it's not working. I was like, well, you've been doing it for 2 weeks. Yeah. Like, you've been thinking negatively for your life.
Yeah. We can't fix 30 years in 2 weeks type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
exactly. And you also mentioned something earlier, like when we first, I'm not sure if it was before the conversation or right when we hit record, like about pain and discomfort. It's either going to help you or hurt you. Or something like that. Yeah.
So the phrase I come back to, and the thing that I kind of discovered when I was going through training with the Marines, and going through some super arduous tests, to put it lightly, was that our true nature, who we actually are, or the product of our beliefs, is a different way to put this. Like, the worst of us and the best of us can come out under physical duress. So training is a metaphor for who we are in life, and life is a metaphor for who we are when we're training. And when we go under like extreme physical duress, this is why I love CrossFit so much, because in 8 minutes you can get to the soul of somebody. You can see who they really are. You can see whether can see whether they quit early. You can see whether they throw a strop. You can see whether they thrive under pressure, or they become the best version of themselves. So you can see their inner grit and their levels of it, or whether they just want to give up and whether they don't feel comfortable there. You can assess who that person is in a fantastic way. And sure, there might be differences. They might feel super confident and working, but let's put that aside. Like, their influences and their beliefs, we can bring them to the surface under physical duress. So that's why I love training. That's why I kind of I've fallen in love with CrossFit, and that's why it's such a useful system to get to who people are.
Yeah. So for those of you, I mean, I did CrossFit for many, many years. I kind of like a chameleon when it comes to being an athlete. I like lots of different things. For someone that's not a CrossFitter, because I'm sure we have a lot of people that are not CrossFitters on the line here that are listening to this recording. What other things? How would someone else recognize if they're not within that? Like, I think why CrossFit's so cool because you're in that group mentality. Like you have like
a cult. Let's call it a cult.
Hey, listen, but it is. I mean, cult means like a culture, right?
Yeah,
so it's a full blown culture. But what I like about it is you're able to recognize like where people are struggling and want to push through, and you can encourage them. But for the person that's not, that may go to a corporate type of gym or even just have a gym in their house, how would they recognize, like how would they start to like pay attention to these maybe emotions, or am I quit? Like what's this whole mindset thing? Because I was doing pull-ups before I got on the call with you. I have
Nice.
I have little dumbbells here. I got a pull-up bar. I got a vibration plate behind me. Like, so I'm always constantly trying to move. But when it comes to training, I've learned and long and hard that the mindset is huge and I need to really go beyond. But for the person that's like, holy shit, how do I do this without a group?
Nice.
Where do we go?
Yeah, so it's exactly the same. Like in fact, your language will probably come out much clearer when you're by yourself.
Okay.
You'll have less influence from other people. Like, let's go back to the influence thing. The influence of the gym is huge, or the influence of people you surround yourself with, the culture you surround yourself with is going to be huge. So we've got to listen to that language when we're in the gym as well. And if we're quiet, if we're by ourselves, if we've just got our headphones in, I'd get rid of headphones for a week whilst we test this. Like, go through a testing phase, get rid of the headphones because they're a distraction. Get rid of if you're like let's just say you're looking at the TV in front of you whilst you're in the gym. Like, get rid of that, switch off, and pay attention to who you are, because that's the fundamental thing that got us to where we are now. If you can't succeed, it's because you've been switching off from the emotional states and the language that's coming up and all that kind of stuff. You've been switching off from it, and now we need to become, back to that word, aware. We need to become aware in order to gain perspective. So we do exactly the same exercise. We learn our language. We listen to our inner athlete. We hear what it's saying. We hear that we feel the emotion that it tries to bring up to get us to quit or to push too hard too early, like whatever it is. We feel the physical sensation. Is there too much tension in our body when we train? Like that's huge. Whether you're a CrossFitter or not a CrossFitter, especially if you're unfamiliar with an exercise, you hold tension in your body and you grip the barbell too tight, or you just like tense everything and there's no flow there. You look at like my big thing right now is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You look at the difference between an expert black level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player and someone who's there for the white, on their white belt, on the even 3-4 months in. There's so much tension in the white belt. There's that holding on to it, and you can see it, the sweat, their breathing changes, and that physical side of things compared to the master, who's laughing, who's playing, who's just you can see loose but moving with intention at the same time. So you see the physical side of it, and you just pay attention to who you're being at the same time. There's hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you said something that's so important. They got to disconnect to reconnect. As someone that just as a runner as well, some of my best, hardest, most challenging, and then become most fun runs at distance are when I don't have earbuds in, because you have to listen to yourself, and that is so damn hard sometimes, because your body will tell you, like you said, you gotta quit, and I'm just like, screw you, I'm at mile 13, I got 20 more miles left, type of thing. So it's getting over those barriers, and it's hard all the time. It's not that it's like this mindset thing is like, oh, I got it, I'm done. Yeah. Right. Yeah,
that's exactly it. It's going to take time. That's what it comes back to. It's going to take time to learn to master your mindset. But the interesting thing, or the interesting way to look at it, is how associated with the movement are we? So I go through this really elaborate process to kind of reteach people how associated with the movement they should be, how aggressive they should be or how passive they should be, what kind of self-talk to use to kind of optimize their athletic performance. And this spans like a big arch. You imagine a very explosive movement on one side of the arch and a very kind of slow, passive, endurance-based movement on the other side. And between this, it's almost like a spectrum. Yeah. We have different points along that arch and different kind of language that fits into each area of that. What we need to the reason I'm saying that is we can learn it in a very structured way like that, But if you give your body the attention and the awareness that it deserves, and give your mind the attention and awareness it deserves, it figures it out. Like when we first started running, when I didn't have access to like an iPod or anything like that, when I really first started running, and my mind figured out that I needed to disassociate from the movement. But I needed to go someplace else. So I needed to be aware of what I was doing to some degree, but I needed to not distract myself, but disassociate. So not focus on every path, not to focus in my breathing, but just step and move and flow. And it figures things out. And when we give our mind the freedom and our body the freedom, and don't try and control it and force it and distract it in ways like earbuds or whatever, or speaking to people, or whatever your kind of your drug of choice is when it comes to that, our mind knows the right way. Like back to that evolution thing, we've got like a very minute, like we're essentially the same DNA as we were 70,000 years ago. So like we know what to do. Like our bodies know what to do, our minds know what to do. We've just got to give it the space to do that, and we do that by becoming aware. Yeah,
it's so key. And I grant that you're a young guy. I'm probably a little older than you, but I feel that the farther we get into this world with technology. I mean, listen, we're talking via some airwaves or electrical waves across thousands of miles of ocean, right? Across this big pond, if you will. I know you got the pond, right? The more connected we get technologically, which I do think it does have some benefits, it has a lot of challenges along the way, because it's so easy to get stuck and makes, from not moving at all, period, becoming like a potato on the couch with, our phones. But in general, like this, you're just talking about exercising with music and earbuds. Like we're so entrenched that we can't leave our devices and things alone. How do you see that like affecting people's mindsets in the future? Is it going to make it easier or harder for them to disconnect to reconnect?
I'd love to say that I knew the answer. I'd love to say that I could just sit here and I've seen the way that this unfolds.
You haven't done that in meditation yet, or no?
I'm afraid not. No, I haven't seen it quite yet. All I can say is like the more time I disconnect from technology, like ironically using apps to disconnect myself from technology somehow, the better I feel. And whether it's like another big thing I do is big mountain skiing. When I get in the big mountains and stick some big fat powder skis on me and climb to the top of the mountain with some friends, I'm present, I'm aware, I'm focused, I'm loving life. I noticed that if I get to the top of that mountain, take my phone out to take a photo, it destroys the moment and it destroys where I am. So I think like that disconnection is key to maintaining who we are, which is human beings. But then you read a book like, I don't know whether you read Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, but it basically ends in a terrifying way, which basically says we're like, if we look at the laws of nature, and to get kind of nerdy for a bit, if we look at the laws of nature, I've been through 3 different phases, which like religion to begin with, to order the world, science, that's like the kind of next phase, the current phase, the order the world, and thirdly, what he calls dataism, which is like we process data and upload it to other places, and that's like the law of the universe. And then it looks like we're just going to end up being like taken over by AI and kind of reprogrammed and kind of uploading our minds to the sky. So I've got no idea, man.
I've seen The Matrix, I know, and Terminator,
yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
This is interesting, like, so you're able to, I mean, being that you've learned this over time, would you say that, when you become a master of your mindset, it's you still have to work at it, right? Would you?
It's every single day. Like you don't go to the gym and train for a week and then be fine for the rest of your life. You don't even go on like a gym retreat. You don't go on you don't do it once a year. It's a daily lifestyle. Like if you squatted 500 pounds once and then you didn't squat again, you're never going to squat that again. Like it's just a fact. Like you'd be crazy to think that to lose weight, and you just ate really well for 1 week out of a year, or even 26 weeks out of a year, you would lose weight as you wanted to. No, it's every single day. And like I find it a hardship that I have to like kind of really bring that out to people. It should be obvious, but that's just a cultural thing. Like it's just like we're it's not explained. And if there's one thing that you look after, it should be your mind, not your body. It should be your mind. Like not your business, not even your relationships. It should be your mind, because when your mind is in the right place, everything else takes care of itself.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. So I think one last question, and it's an interesting one because of just experiences that I've had in life, and it's kind of two-part. So men and women, right? Do we carry our mindsets differently? Would be the first question. And two, is a little mini story before a question. You know, I belong to this group called Men of Iron, and part of this is kind of called like a breakdown and breakthrough type of events. But part of it is they put you're in a boxing ring, you know, whether you've ever been a fighter or not. And for me, you know, never being a fighter, I was never a Marine. I was never in the military. I never had these types of experiences where like a man gets to be like a man at like the raw level, like the real, you know, archaic, like, you know, we got to fight. We're the warriors, we're the hunters, we're this stuff. But getting like hit in the face was like such a good thing for me, like mentally, maybe not physically, but it was like almost like a wake up, like, oh, like my mindset is very different. Just from certain experiences like this. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's something that even makes sense to you.
No, let's do the men women thing. I think as human beings, we function individually. We are like everyone's influence is different, and whilst there's certain hormonal profiles and whilst there's certain kind of genetic factors that are going to play into things, we know that just through the way that culture is evolving and the way that what we see in media is evolving, that people are far more unique than we give them credit for. Like I think that's a big piece. And as for the kind of the second point there, like the purpose of those always worries me, because sure, it can be like for you, it's been a really good thing, and like that's great, and like you probably got huge benefit from it and it's helped you in real life. But I speak to people who go through those experiences and they're not in the right place before, and they're told they just need to man up. They just need to sort this shit out and become a like more alpha person and fight and to become more aggressive. That was the kind of language that ended me in a depressive phase, like that put me into a point where I was not happy wherever I wanted to be. So whilst it's great in some scenarios, I don't think it can be applied to everyone.
Oh yeah, no, I would. Yeah. I mean, no, and this event was not like just let's here you go, throw you into a no. There's a lot of evolution that goes into that part of the day. But I just think just from a man's perspective, maybe even just differently than a woman's perspective, like we were talking, like they're much more connected emotionally than men are.
Yeah, maybe like you look at mixed martial arts, and you look at the split of male to female fighters there. Yeah. There's something that testosterone does. There's something that like that does, and I think, and like I feel better when I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I don't know what that is. I don't know whether that's a fighting thing. I don't know whether it's a martial arts thing. I don't know whether it's a process of mastery, but it's one of everything. Like it's all of that combined. Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Very cool. So if we're gonna give, you've dropped a lot of awesome content, but if you were to give our audience something right now, it's like, listen, you could do this, and this, like 1, 2, or 3 things tomorrow, like when they wake up in the morning, what could they do to have a simple shift? I know we mentioned the AMWAP, which I like, but is there something else they can do, like that could be so simple? Like, you know, go for it.
Yeah. Open a journal, open a blank page, and just stream your consciousness out onto paper. That process of getting to learn your inner athlete or know your inner athlete is the most essential thing that you can do. There's 4 basic kind of like exercises that I take people through, but for brevity's sake, that first exercise there, like in the morning before your conscious mind has a time to override your subconscious, because you know it's like when you wake up, you've got the subconscious narrative running strong, and if you feel fear, it's going to be first thing in the morning. If you feel anxiety, it's going to be first thing in the morning. Like, so capturing that on paper first thing is essential, and then AMWAPs as many as you can. Like, just get them in. It's like almost AMWAP, like as many wins as possible, as many times as possible. You get them in as many times as you can, and slowly but surely your mindset shifts.
That's awesome. And Tom, where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. There's a few places. It depends where you're connected first. So Tom Foxley, at Tom Foxley, which is Foxley on Instagram. You can find me personally on Facebook. Like, as much as Mr. Zuckerberg wouldn't like me to do so, I use my personal profile to kind of express my ideas about business and kind of the way I do Mindset Rx and that side of things. So you can, I'm usually most active there. I've got a free Facebook group which is called Mindset for Functional Athletes, which you can find through linking facebook.com/mindsetrx. So that's Romeo X-ray Delta at the end, and then mindsetrx.com, which is again mindset and then Romeo X-ray Delta.com.
Yeah, and so I saw that 2018 is going to be the rest of this year is going to be pretty awesome. You're doing some traveling, doing some not just digital teaching, you're actually doing some live events.
Yeah, last year or 2017 was the process of perfecting my seminars and my workshops. I've now really boiled it down to a 3-hour workshop, which I'll be taking to the States at some point. I think it's in October the 20th and 27th. I'm in Boston and somewhere I've definitely forgotten right now. But they pop up throughout Europe, throughout the rest of the year. I'm organizing a few more, and I'm going to get further afield eventually. And eventually my coach is going to do that as well. But for now, they're kind of spreading out.
That's fantastic. So Tom, I want to thank you. And share some gratitude, because I appreciate you finding me. And I'm so glad that we could connect. I think this is such an important piece to having an awesome lifestyle. Without your mind, you ain't got nothing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Right, Tom. So Locker Nation, how awesome is Tom Foxley? Remember, if you want to connect with him, you can hit up all the links that he just mentioned, or you can just check the show notes, which may be a little bit easier. Make sure you do follow him, though, on social media. He's got some really cool stuff. Mindset Rx'd. Very cool dude. Very. And you know what? If you haven't followed us on Facebook or me on Instagram, you should be doing that as well. Remember to head over to lifestylelocker.com. You can check out all the previous interviews we've had, or you can hit us up on iTunes and leave us a sweet 5-star review. That would be greatly appreciated. And until next time, Locker Nation, have an awesome day, evening, or night. Peace out.